All right, let's dive into this deep dive into mastering English writing. I'm seeing a really interesting mix of articles and notes you sent over. It looks like you're really trying to level up your writing skills, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Writing can sometimes feel like a chore, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to try and uncover the strategies and tips that make writing not only easier, but actually enjoyable.
You're absolutely right. Having strong writing skills it can really open so many doors, whether it's for work or creative expression, or even just communicating clearly in everyday life. It's definitely a skill worth honing and spending time on.
Absolutely. And I noticed in your notes you specifically mentioned wanting to write a blog post about topic from the listener's source. That's a great goal to have. One of your source name had a really interesting point about understanding your why and who before you even start writing.
That's such a fundamental concept, but honestly, so many people skip over it. That same source actually compares it to planning a trip. You wouldn't just start driving without knowing where you're going and who you're taking with you.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy. So in the case of your blog post, the why is to share your knowledge and insights on topic from the listener's source.
Yeah.
And your who is your target audience. Who are you trying to reach with this post?
Exactly. And once you have a clear understanding of your purpose and audience, you can then start thinking about other things like tone and style. For example, if you're writing for a general audience, you'll want to keep your language clear and accessible. But if you're writing for a more specialized audience, you can then use more technical jargon.
Makes sense. Another one of your sources, source name, talks about the importance of reading to improve writing. They actually suggest something pretty cool, mimicking the style of your favorite authors.
Oh, I've tried that myself. It's surprisingly effective. By trying to write like someone you admire, you start to internalize their sentence structures and their vocabulary choices, even their rhythm.
Yes.
Specific sources included in your materials. And I'm always struck by their use of imagery. They really bring their writing to life.
I love that source too. Do you have a favorite example?
Oh, definitely. There's this one line. Quote from source. It showcases their ability to evoke such strong visuals with just a few words. It's something aspiring writers can definitely learn from. You don't need a huge vocabulary to write well. It's more about choosing the right words.
It's about making those words work hard for you. Now, I know vocabulary and grammar can be a little bit intimidating for some people. You've included a couple articles on this, one advocating for keeping a vocabulary notebook. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it can be a helpful tool, especially if you're really actively trying to expand your vocabulary. It encourages you to pay attention to new words you encounter and to actively use them in your writing. However, I wouldn't get too bogged down in trying to memorize lists of words.
Right. It's more about using them naturally in your writing, not just showing off a big vocabulary. Speaking of tools, you mentioned Grammarly in your notes. Do you find those kinds of digital tools helpful?
Oh, they can be really useful, especially for catching those little grammar gremlins that we all miss from time to time. But it's important to remember that they're just tools. They can help polish your writing, but they can't replace the thinking and creativity that goes into it.
Absolutely. They're like a safety net, not the whole act. Okay, so we've talked about purpose, audience, reading, vocabulary, and grammar. What's next on our deep dive?
Well, one of your sources, source name, stresses the importance of daily practice. They actually suggest dedicating just 10-15 minutes each day to writing. It doesn't have to be a huge commitment, but consistency is key.
I love that idea. Even just setting a timer for 10 minutes in free writing can help loosen up your writing muscles. And it doesn't always have to be serious writing either. You could write a funny caption for a social media post or jot down a quick observation about your day.
Exactly. It's all about getting those words flowing and building that writing habit. Speaking of making writing a habit, I'm curious about your personal experience with setting writing goals. Have you found that to be helpful?
Definitely. Having a specific goal in mind, like your blog post, helps to focus my efforts. But I also try to break down larger goals into smaller, more manageable chunks.
That's a great strategy. It can be overwhelming to stare at a blank page and think, I need to write a whole blog post. But if you break it down into smaller tasks, like writing an outline or researching a specific point, it becomes much more manageable.
And less intimidating. I find that having a plan really helps to alleviate that feeling of being overwhelmed. But even with a plan, sometimes the words just don't seem to flow. What do you do when you hit a writing roadblock?
Well, one thing that often works for me is to step away from the writing for a bit. Go for a walk, listen to some music, do something completely unrelated to writing. Sometimes that mental break can help to clear the cobwebs and allow fresh ideas to emerge.
I do that too. Sometimes I even find that talking to someone about my writing, Even if it's just a friend or family member, can help to spark new ideas or uncover different angles I hadn't considered. It's like bouncing ideas off a sounding board.
That's a great point. And it leads us to another important aspect of the writing process that you highlighted in your notes, getting feedback.
Yeah, it's so valuable, but it can be nerve-wracking to share your writing with others, especially when it's something you've poured your heart and soul into. How do you approach giving and receiving feedback in a way that's constructive and helpful?
Well, it's all about framing it as a collaborative process. Remember, the goal of feedback is to make the writing stronger, not to tear it down. And I think it's helpful to remember that. Even the most experienced writers benefit from feedback.
Absolutely. Nobody's perfect, and we can all learn from each other. And one of your sources, source name, suggests joining online writing communities, like Reddit's Writing or Quora. Have you had any experience with those?
I have. I've found them to be incredibly valuable, both for getting feedback and for connecting with other writers. They can offer a sense of community and support that can be really helpful, especially if you're feeling stuck or discouraged.
It's like having a whole team of cheerleaders and coaches in your corner. It's amazing to see how different perspectives can help to shape and improve a piece of writing. It really is a collaborative art form. So as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, we've covered a lot of ground. We talked about purpose, audience, reading, vocabulary, grammar, practice, setting goals, overcoming roadblocks, and the importance of feedback. What stands out to you as the most important takeaway so far?
I think the biggest takeaway is that good writing is a process, not a product. It's about constantly learning, experimenting, and refining your craft. And it's a journey that's best shared with others.
Beautifully said. It's about embracing the journey and finding joy in the process. But we're not done yet. Stay tuned for the next part of our deep dive, where we'll explore even more strategies for mastering English writing. See you soon.
Welcome back. I'm excited to continue exploring these writing tips with you.
Me too. We were just talking about the power of feedback and community, which leads perfectly to our next topic, revision. It's something a lot of writers struggle with, but it's such a crucial part of the process.
It really is where the magic happens. You mentioned feeling nervous about sharing your work, and that's totally natural, but one of your sources, a source name, points out that feedback can help you see your writing through a different lens. It can help you to spot things that you might have missed, even in a piece that you've poured your heart and soul into.
It's like having a fresh set of eyes on your work. I know I often get too close to my own writing and can't see the forest for the trees. But that doesn't mean you have to take every suggestion you receive right.
Exactly. You get to make the final decisions about your work. It's more about considering those different perspectives and then deciding what resonates with you and what aligns with your vision for the piece.
And even if you don't incorporate every single suggestion, feedback can still spark new ideas or help you identify areas where you might need to do some more work.
Absolutely. And that leads us to revision, which is all about refining, clarifying, and polishing your writing. One of your sources compares it to sculpting. You start with a rough block of marble and then carefully chip away at it until you reveal the masterpiece within.
I love that analogy. It so perfectly captures the iterative nature of revision. It's not about getting it perfect on the first try, but rather about embracing the process of shaping and refining your work over time.
You know, it's like you said earlier, good writing is a process, not a product. And revision is a key part of that process. It's where you get to step back, assess your work with a critical eye, and make those strategic changes that elevate your writing to the next level.
And we're lucky to live in a time where we have some amazing tools to help us with that revision process. You mentioned Grammarly earlier, and it can be a great help with catching those pesky grammar and spelling errors. But there are other tools out there too.
Oh, absolutely. One of your sources actually mentions Hemingway Editor, which can be really helpful for simplifying complex sentences and making your writing more concise and impactful. It analyzes your writing and flags sentences that are too long or convoluted, helping you to streamline your prose.
It's like having a digital writing coach right there in your computer. And speaking of digital tools, you also included some articles about online writing communities. I think those can be such a valuable resource for writers at all levels.
They can. They offer a space to connect with other writers, share your work, get feedback, and just generally talk shop about all things writing. It can be really helpful to connect with people who understand the joys and challenges of the writing process.
It's like having a built-in support system for your writing journey. And I think it's especially helpful for writers who might not have access to in-person writing groups or workshops.
You've hit the nail on the head. These online communities can provide that sense of connection and belonging that can be so crucial for writers, especially those who might feel isolated or unsure of themselves. Plus, they offer a wonderful opportunity to learn from others and to gain different perspectives on your work.
And sometimes just reading other people's writing can be incredibly inspiring. It can spark new ideas or remind you why you fell in love with the writing in the first place. You know, one thing that really stood out to me in your source materials was the emphasis on finding joy in the writing process.
Yeah, that is so important. It's easy to get caught up in the technical aspects of writing, the grammar rules, the sentence structures, the need for perfection. But ultimately, writing should be an enjoyable experience.
It's like any creative pursuit. It's about tapping into that inner spark of inspiration and letting it guide you.
I couldn't agree more. One of your sources actually suggests setting aside dedicated time for playful writing, where you just let your imagination run wild and experiment with different styles and voices. It's a great way to break free from self-imposed limitations and just have fun with words.
I love that idea. It reminds me of the importance of not taking ourselves too seriously. Writing can be challenging, but it should also be fun. And sometimes the best way to break through a writing block or overcome a fear of failure is to simply loosen up and allow yourself to play with language.
You've hit the nail on the head. Approaching writing with a sense of playfulness and curiosity can unlock a whole new level of creativity and enjoyment. It's about rediscovering the joy of storytelling and the magic of crafting words into something meaningful and engaging.
So to wrap up this part of our deep dive, we've talked about the importance of revision, the value of feedback, the power of online writing communities, and the joy of embracing a playful approach to writing. What resonates with you most from this discussion?
I think the key takeaway for me is that writing is a journey, not a destination. It's about constantly evolving, experimenting, and finding new ways to express yourself. And it's a journey that's best shared with others, whether it's through feedback, community, or simply the act of sharing your work with the world.
Beautifully put. And remember, even the most accomplished writers started somewhere. They faced challenges, they made mistakes, they revised and refined their work countless times. The key is to keep writing, keep learning, and keep exploring the boundless possibilities of language. Are you ready to dive into the final part of our deep dive?
Absolutely. Let's continue this exploration and see what other gems we can uncover.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our English writing deep dive. I'm excited to wrap things up with some key takeaways and maybe a few more nuggets of wisdom from your source materials.
Yeah, me too. It's been great, this journey, exploring all these different aspects of writing, from, understanding your audience to embracing the joy of experimentation.
Absolutely, going through your sources. One thing that really struck me was this. Emphasis on the power of storytelling, it seems like. No matter what you're writing, a blog post, an email, even a technical document. The ability to tell a compelling story can make all the difference.
It's true. One of your sources, source name, talks about how even the most complex information can be made more engaging and memorable through storytelling. They actually give this example of specific example from source.
That's such a good example. It shows how storytelling can bring even dry technical information to life. And I think it ties in beautifully with the idea of understanding your audience. If you can tap into what resonates with them, what their interests and motivations are, you can craft stories that really capture their attention.
Exactly. It's all about making that connection with your reader, drawing them into your world, and taking them on a journey through your words.
I love that. And speaking of journeys, I think it's important to remember that becoming a better writer is an ongoing process. There's always something new to learn, a new technique to try, a new story to tell.
Right. Yeah, one of your sources compares it to learning a musical instrument. You wouldn't expect to master the piano overnight, right? It takes time, practice, and a willingness to embrace that learning process.
Such a great analogy. And just like with music, there are so many different styles and genres of writing to explore. You might find yourself drawn to one particular style, or you might enjoy experimenting with different forms of writing. The key is to find what resonates with you, what sparks your creativity, and what allows you to express yourself authentically.
And to embrace the journey. With all its challenges and triumphs, remember, even the most successful writers face setbacks and moments of self-doubt. What sets them apart is their resilience, their determination to keep writing, keep learning, and keep refining their craft.
And their willingness to embrace those imperfections along the way. It's about letting go of the need for perfection and allowing yourself to make mistakes, to experiment, to play with language.
You've hit the nail on the head. One of your sources actually encourages writers to embrace the mess, to allow themselves to write freely without worrying about getting everything perfect on the first try. They argue that it's in those messy, imperfect moments that true creativity often emerges.
I love that. It's a reminder that writing is a process of discovery, and sometimes the most unexpected detours lead to the most rewarding destinations.
It's about trusting the process, staying curious, and never losing sight of the joy of writing.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question from one of your sources. What story are you waiting to tell?
That's a great question. We all have stories within us, stories of our experiences, our observations, our hopes and dreams, and the world is waiting to hear them.
So don't be afraid to share your unique voice, to experiment with different styles, and to embrace the journey of becoming a better writer.
And remember, every time you sit down to write, you have the opportunity to create something meaningful, something that connects with others, something that makes a difference in the world.
That's a beautiful thought to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of English writing. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and feel inspired to continue honing your craft. Until next time, happy writing.